Right, so our top story at this time, former President Jacob Zuma will today know his fate regarding his medical parole. Correctional Services Commissioner Makgothi Thobakgale is expected to announce whether Zuma will return to prison to complete his 15-month sentence or not. In July of 2021, Zuma was arrested at his home in Nkandla and imprisoned at the Escort Correctional Centre. It comes after the Constitutional Court found him guilty of contempt of court related to his refusal to appear before the Zondo Commission. A violence which led to looting and arson erupted in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, of course, following Zuma's conviction. While 350 people were also killed in the unrest, which cost the economy at least 50 billion rand. Well, to discuss this further, we're going to be joined by legal analyst Melusi Xulu as we wait for that decision by the Correctional Services Commissioner Makgothi Thobakgale. Melusi, good afternoon. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC. All right, we're trying to get Melusi on the line, perhaps as we await the sentiments that we'll reflect on rather shortly. Obviously, South Africa's top court having rejected an attempt to overturn a previous decision that found that former President Jacob Zuma, in fact, should now go back to jail after being released early on medical parole. He was sentenced to 15 months in prison. I believe, Melusi, you're back on the line. If you can hear me, good afternoon, and thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, Lizelle. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, so we can hear you loud and clear. Perhaps as we preview some of the scenarios unfolding, you could just speak to, or rather reflect on the previous judgments leading up to the situation as we await the announcement a little later today.
Okay, the previous judgment, Lizelle, it was that the appeal that was made by the Correctional Services Department, it was not going to succeed, it failed, and they decided that the former president must go back to Escort prison. However, what is most important is that they say that the decision whether the time that he has served outside should be counted or not, that will lie on the decision that is to be made by the acting national commissioner. So that is what we are waiting for today, because remember, they issued a statement and said today on the 10th of August, they will decide what will happen to the fate of the former president.
So with all things considered, in this case, what does the law allow? Possibilities and probabilities that we're exploring as we await the announcement.
Well, the possibility that one can expect, not to say it's certain, is that based on the discretion of the national commissioner, will he state that the time that the former president has spent on the medical parole, as much as it has been decided that it's unlawful, will that time be the time that the national commissioner will say he has served his time and will decide based on his discretion that he does not need to go back to prison based on that? But however, what I'm expecting is that, let's say he decides that he has served his time. I do think that the applicants who took the matter to court, namely AfriForum and the DA, I believe they will challenge the decision. So it's more like he's stuck in between a rock and a hard place, because if he decides that he served his time, they will challenge that. And if he decides that he must go back to jail, well, we don't know what will happen, but obviously, the Constitutional Court has decided that the medical parole that was decided was an unlawful decision.
The appeal court saying that the matter concerning how an inmate serves his sentence, when and how, rests in the province of the executive. Perhaps you could also understand, or help us understand, the separation of powers that come into play, perhaps as we look at that in relation to respect for the rule of law.
Okay. Well, the rule of law basically is that there's the separation of powers, namely the parliament, the execution, and the judiciary. So the judiciary does not want to be in a position where they are now overlapping their powers, where they will be telling maybe the execution what to do. So they will obviously be careful how they structure their judgment as the judiciary. So they do not want to impose and overlap their role and state things which they are not supposed to state, but they can simply obviously guide or advise. So that is what they are stating when they are saying they are taking note of the separation of powers. So we will see, obviously, based on that independence, what the execution will do. Namely, the execution is obviously, in this case, the Correctional Services Department.
Well, there are obviously consequences, both intended and unintended. What precedents will this set? What happens to the court itself, if as well? Help us understand what these consequences are.
Okay, I think what we can learn from this, obviously, if you look at how the decision was made, is based on Section 79 of the Correctional Services Act, which states that when the medical parole is granted, it must be based on medical reasons by experts. The commissioner can be guided. And if you read the, I believe, the Supreme Court of Appeal judgment, they do say, look, even when us as the judges look at what was stated, we would have decided that they're not to grant the medical parole. So what it teaches us is that if you want a medical parole, there must be medical reasons which are clear. And this is what we are learning. And the consequences is that if you are granted a medical parole without reasons based on medicine, that medical parole can be unlawful.
So with his age, the former president at 81, health also being a factor. We know that recently it was announced that he also returned from Russia for treatment. How does this all play into the dynamics unfolding?
Okay. There's a very old case that we sometimes use, or most of the time use, when we deciding on sentencing. It's a case of S versus Zin. It's a 1969 case where it was stated that when we are considering sentence, there are three things that we look at. We look at the interest of the society, we look at the seriousness of the case, and lastly, we look at the personal circumstance of the accused. So the age of the accused is relevant, and well, I can't talk about his health now because it was decided that on the medical parole he did not deserve it. But I do not know what his health is now because he went to Russia. But I just want to focus on his age mostly. That, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he's 81 years old. So based on that, his age can be a factor.
And then just to wrap things up, you spoke about, in relation to that 1969 case, interests of society, seriousness of the matter, and also personal circumstances of the accused. What scenarios are we also expecting for the country at large?
Can you repeat the last part? Sorry.
I just wanted to know, on the back of the announcement, what are some of the scenarios that we can also anticipate for the country at large, given that the interest of society is also a factor cited, perhaps in relation to that 1969 case? We also saw what transpired in South Africa 2 years ago.
Okay. I think now you're being specific on the unrest. Okay. Look, I think we just need to educate the society about the consequences obviously of not following the law if this is what happened. And we just need to educate the society that when one has done wrong, obviously the law will take its course. However, I think it's also in the interest of the society that, as much as a person might have done wrong, we need to consider the seriousness of the offense, but also their age. I don't think anyone is interested of seeing an 80-plus-year-old, staying in jail for a longer time, than anticipated for his age. So I think, as a society, we need the balance of fairness to what happens when you've been convicted, so that one can learn and there can be a deterrent to that offense. But we also need to be fair to the accused as well when he's as old as the former president, in my view.
All right, Melusi, let's leave the conversation there. We're obviously awaiting the announcement. Another test for the strength of our democracy. Melusi Xulu is a legal analyst weighing in ahead of the announcement. We know that former President Jacob Zuma will today know his fate regarding his medical parole. Correctional Services Commission, in fact, expected to make that announcement later today.